Alright, today we're going to look at solving compound inequalities. And if you look on the front of your packet, you have two equations. One is an and equation and one is an or equation. I actually don't have a copy of this page at home with me, so I made another one up. And then you can just transfer what you learned from this example onto your note sheet. So the first thing that I see is this 2 is less than x is less than 6. And really what that means, you can split this into two different equations or inequalities, and you can write 2 is less than x, and then you just double the x and write x is less than 6. So all this compound inequality is two inequalities that are pushed together. So I'm going to go ahead and graph this first one. So the one that says 2 is less than x. And remember, in order to graph it, we're going to go ahead and flip them back around. So that means I'm going to write x is greater than 2. So I know I want to put my open circle on 2, and I want to shade to the right. And then the other one, I want the x's that are less than 6. So I'm going to put an open circle on 6, and I'm going to shade to the left. And because this is an and inequality, it's two that are pushed together like this, you're only going to shade this in between section. So on an and inequality, you only shade a small section of the graph. Now we're going to look at the close cousin of the and we're going to look at the or inequality. Again, I have two separate inequalities that are joined with this word or. So I'm going to graph them separately. The first one, again, it's written backwards, so I'm going to go ahead and flip it around. Start with the x, and then you'll notice here that the big side of the inequality is touching or closest to the x, so I'm going to make sure that it is a greater than symbol, opposite, and then keep my 3. So I want the x's that are greater than 3. I'm going to put a circle on 3 and then shade to the right. On the other one, I want the x's that are less than -1. I don't have to flip that around or anything. So I'm going to put a circle on -1, and then they are less on the left, so I'm going to shade to the left. On an or inequality, you end up with these two separate arrows, and then there's like a space in the middle. So if it's an or inequality, you end up going to one side and the other side with the middle being open. And on an and inequality, you only shade in the center section. So you can go ahead and copy this information into your notes. It just has different numbers. Okay, now we're on the last page of your packet, and our goal is going to be to finish this and turn the packet in today. So this, I believe, is question number 1. Since I have one variable but two inequality symbols, I know that this is going to be an and inequality. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to split it into two. And so the first one, it is a over 6, if I'm reading it backwards, is greater than 0. And so to solve for just this inequality, totally ignore the other one, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to multiply by 6. I'm going to do that on the other side also. 0 times 6 is 0. Keep my inequality. And then I have a. Now I don't want to graph it with the a on the right. I'm going to go ahead and flip it the other way. So I want to graph where the a's are. See how the open side of the arrow is close to the a? So I want the open side close to the a. The a's are greater than 0. And now, conveniently, to solve the other inequality, it's going to be the exact same steps. So they're dividing by 6, and I'm going to go ahead and multiply by 6 here. So that means I have to multiply by 1 by 6. Those cancel out. And I will have a is less than 6. So now I have two inequalities that I can graph. So I'm going to draw my number line. I'm going to want to put both of my numbers on my number line. So I'm going to want a 6 and I'm going to want a 0. I'm going to want something that's smaller and something that's bigger. And you may want to put something in the middle. It doesn't really matter. Okay, so this one first. Since it has the line underneath the inequality symbol, I'm going to go ahead and make that a solid dot. So solid dot on 0. And then I want to shade to the right. So I'll just shade a little bit to the right. On the other one, I want that one to be an open circle because there's not a line. And on this one, I want to shade to the left. So I'm going to shade to the left. And remember, it's an and inequality. So it's generally, there are exceptions to every rule. it's generally between two dots or two circles. Okay, the next one, this is an OR inequality, so I'm going to go ahead and multiply by 4 on both sides. I'm going to have k is less than negative 8. I don't have to flip my inequality because the number that I multiplied by is positive. And then on this side, I'm going to multiply by 8, and I'll have k is greater than or equal to 8. So because it's an OR inequality, I'm pretty sure I'm going to graph, one arrow to the right and one arrow to the left with an open space in the middle. So let's just see how that plays out. So on my number line, I'll go ahead and put maybe a 10 and an 8, 0, negative 8, negative 10. And I'm going to put a circle on negative 8, and because you'll notice right here, this is just a regular inequality, no line underneath it. I'm just going to put an open circle, and I want to shade where the k's are smaller, or shade to the left. So I'll go ahead and shade to the left. On the other one, this one does have a line underneath it, so this line right here tells us that I'm going to go ahead and shade in the 8, so put a solid circle on 8. And then I'm going to shade to the right, because the arrow is pointing to the right. So you'll see how I have those two divergent arrows going to opposite ends with the space in the middle. Okay, now here's another way. Sometimes they write the and inequalities and they separate it with the word and. It's still the same process. In some ways, these are almost easier. So to solve this, to get rid of the number underneath the variable, I'm going to multiply by 4 on both sides. Those cancel out, and I'll just have n left over. Keep my inequality because the number I multiplied by wasn't negative, and 2 times 4 is 8. On here, multiply by 9. So n is less than 9. And it is an and inequality, so that's kind of important to note. So now I'm going to go ahead and graph these. Luckily, they're both facing the correct direction. So if I put some numbers on, I'm going to put an open circle on 8, and I want to shade to the right. I'm going to put an open circle on 9, and this one I want to shade to the left. So there we go, shaded in the middle. Okay, I only have time for about one more. So to get x by itself, I'm going to subtract 7. And now I have x is less than or equal to negative 4. And then on the other side, I'm going to multiply by 2. And I'll have x is greater than or equal to 0. So now to graph these, definitely want my numbers, probably something bigger and smaller. For the first one, I want a solid circle because of this line underneath, so I'll put a solid circle on negative 4. And the arrow says that I want to shade to the left. And on the 0, I'm also going to put a solid circle because of the line underneath. And this one I'm going to shade to the right. So just like our other OR inequalities, they go ahead and split and go opposite directions. Alright, I can squeeze one more difficult one in. So to get the x by itself, this is actually a two-step inequality. I'm going to subtract 4 from both sides. So I'll have negative 8x is greater than 60 minus 4 is 56. Now I'm going to divide by negative 8. And we've been practicing all week. If the number that I divide by is negative, that's when I flip the inequality. So I'll have x is less than negative 7. On the other side, I'm going to subtract 8. So 6x is greater than or equal to, this will be negative 24. Then I'm going to divide by 6. And since here the number I'm dividing by is positive, I don't have to flip the inequality. And I'll just have x is greater than or equal to negative 4. So on my number line, I'm going to put some numbers. I'm going to put an open circle on negative 7. And I'm going to shade to the left. And then I'm going to put a solid circle on negative 4. and I'm going to shade to the right. All right, you should now finish the rest of your packet. The odd answers are on the back.